Welcome to our workshop on rethinking climate change with the Iceberg model. My name is Adriana and I work at Systems Innovation as a community developer. And today I will be the host of this event together with my distinguished colleague, Jos, who will join us to facilitate the workshop part. And we will share the link to the Miro board in a second when we start with the practical part of the workshop. So the plan for today and for this 90 minutes workshop is to explore and map out the different levels of the challenge of climate change by using the Iceberg model. This event is run by our SI Climate Lab, so we will start with a little explanation about the purpose of the lab. Then we will explain the challenge we would like to address, followed by a brief explanation of what is our understanding of the Iceberg model. And then my colleague Jos will facilitate the workshop part in which we will explore how the Iceberg model could be applied in the context of climate change. And finally, we will share information about how we plan to disseminate and use the result of this exercise. And we will share details about our next activities and next events, and you will be also able to provide feedback and ideas about this event and future events. So before we start, I think we are a very international group, so I would like to ask you to put in the comments from which part of the world you're joining us today. People from The Hague, from Tokyo, from Texas, wow, from London, Greece, Dubai, very nice. Welcome, everyone. Now today's event is part of the SI Climate Lab, as I said. So the initiative, this is an initiative of our London hub, which reflects on cities as an epicenter of climate change, both in terms of contributing to it and needing to adapt to it, considering not only a physical infrastructure, but also institutional structures that operate inside us and are rigid and make them slow to respond for the required collaborations for systemic change. Our initiative aims to research this challenge and design and develop a platform that addresses these limitations. So here, maybe we can show our beautiful team members, and you can also see some details about our climate lab. And you can join us in the platform. And yeah, we are always also wanted to share that we are always looking for people who are interested in this team and who would like to work with us. So you can post a message in our group or send us a direct message to me or to Jos. So now a little bit about the challenge we will explore today. Climate change is a wicked problem. It doesn't exist in isolation, so its causes are multiple and complex, and its impacts are uncertain and interrelated. And potential solutions to climate change might well cause further problems. So addressing climate change goes far beyond from focusing on solving the immediate problems like reducing greenhouse gas emissions and moreover, and we fail to recall the broader complex system it emerges out of. So to move away from linear symptomatic responses, we need to unpack the thinking that leads to this approach and shift from thinking of the problem as out there being like a function of our systemic patterns of thinking. And put another way, to go from sporadic linear solutions where we don't see the bigger picture to systemic transformation, discussing the deeper structures. And this is when we use the Iceberg model. So before we start with the real part of the workshop, it might be useful to make sure that we have a shared understanding of what is the Iceberg model. So in general terms, it's a systems thinking tool designed to help an individual or a group to discover the patterns and the patterns of behavior and supporting structure and the mental model that underline a particular event or an issue. Basically, it expands their perception of a situation to see it within the context of the whole system and not limit themselves to looking at just a single activity or event or a problem. So the iceberg model is used to represent the underlying structures generating perceived event or an issue. So, and also the expression tip of the iceberg is used to connote that when one can see is only a small part of the whole system and the whole situation. Therefore, there is much more below the structure, and what it looks like may be surprising. So just like an iceberg, a large percentage of what is going on in our world is hidden from the view of, and the iceberg model tries to make this explicit by depicting it as a series of layers and sit below what we observe every day. So now I give the floor to Jos, who will facilitate the fun part of this exercise, which is the more practical one.
Great. Thank you very much, Adriana. So just to note that today's event is being recorded. It's going to be 90 minutes long. We're already about 10 minutes in, so we're going to have about 80 minutes to work on our workshop, and I'll be facilitating that activity and the discussion we'll have. As mentioned, my name is Jos Kolster, along with Adriana, my colleagues there. We're with the SI London Hub. Well, I'm with the SI London Hub, and the others are with the Climate Lab here that we've been working on for the past about 4 or 5 months now, exploring this challenge of climate resilient cities. And this is our first workshop, or second workshop, I should say, in this series that we're doing. So great to have you all joining. I'm really looking forward to this. Just to say a couple of words about this canvas and how it's going to work going forwards. So you may be, hopefully you're familiar with the iceberg model. Maybe you're familiar with theory U also, because this is somewhat reflective of those ideas, that what we're going to do is go down one side of the iceberg here. As Adriana said, the iceberg model is a way for us to kind of unpack the different levels to a system, to a challenge, to an issue, and try and get down to more fundamental issues, these systemic structures and mental models, and move away from this linear approach that's really just trying to change the parts, the events, and the outcomes. So what we're going to do is firstly go down the left-hand side here of the iceberg model and ask, what are the current patterns, what are the current events, patterns, structures, and mental models? And then we're going to try and think about, if we change that paradigm, if we change that the mental models, what then would emerge up the other side here, where we reconstruct the systemic structures that would emerge out of those mental models, those new ways of looking at the system. And from those structures, what would emerge in terms of patterns over time, and ultimately what would be the new outcomes that we would get in the system if we made this paradigm shift down here. So here's the canvas we're going to use. Hopefully you're on the mirror board. Yasmin or Adriana can share the link again. And yeah, we're going to move down left and then up to the right. Let me just kind of walk you through that a little bit so that you're aware of what's going on. Hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes for each of these boxes. It'll be, we'll iterate through you posting up your ideas, and then us taking about 5 minutes for that, and then 5 minutes for us to discuss what you have come up with, so that we can all get a picture of an idea of what's going on here. So quickly, the events here first. We're going to start here. What are the current events, the current outcomes that we're seeing in the system? I'll give a few examples as we go through, and then the systemic structures, systemic patterns. How are things changing over time? Structures, these are the norms, policy, guidelines, exchanges, the way information is exchanged, the way things are interlinked in the system. Again, I give some examples there, the current mental models, how are we looking at the system, how are we framing the challenge? And then here is where we try and flip that and change it to a new mental model, a new paradigm, new structures emerging out of that, patterns and ultimately events. So that's what we'll be working on for the next 70 to 80 minutes. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And one of us can get to that. We're going to work through it starting here on the left and go through to the right, because it's a process of first kind of understanding the existing system and how it's created based upon these structures and mental models, and then thinking about how that could change in the emergence of a new system. So we'll start over here on the events level. So this is the events, the individual activities or facts about the state of things in the system. So we're going to get started now. I'm just going to give you two examples and then have you post up your stickies here. So these could also be, sometimes people do this as the headlines. What do we see in the newspaper? These are the kind of snapshots of what's going on in the system that you might see in the news. So for example, with millions of subsistence farmers in Uttar Pradesh in northern India apparently highly vulnerable to changes in climate. So that's just a little snapshot of what's going on in the system, in the world that we're in at the moment, in this climate crisis, should we call it. Here's another example. It's a headline. Actually, I just took this. It's a headline, I think from The Guardian, and it says, "Ice and sled dogs disappear as Greenland warms up. As temperatures rise and sea ice melts, lifestyles are changing as fast as the climate in Greenland." That's a little snapshot of what's going on in our world. It's an outcome from the system that we're experiencing at the moment. And I'd love for you to grab a sticky now. And I'm going to set the timer. We'll take 5 minutes to post up our ideas. So if you could keep your stickies small, please, because we have quite a large group and we need to fit it in here. So to get a sticky, you just click on the side here, and then you click on the board, and we'll reduce our stickies down to something like this size, should we say? And then you just type in here, like that. Very simple. Please do keep them small, as I have done there, so that we can fit them all on the board. Try to stay in the box here. We are just doing this first box, so try to just respond to that question of what are the outcomes we see of this system at the moment. Any questions on that? Eric, did you want to say something quickly? You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat as you see best. Okay. There we are. Let's get started. I'm going to set the timer now, and we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we will discuss what we came up with. might also think about some of the headlines that you've seen in the newspaper, like I pulled out there as examples of snapshots of what's going on in the system. Okay, our time is up. Let's take a quick look at what you have come up with here in terms of what do we currently experience? What is the current mental models and systemic structures creating in terms of outcomes in this system? So just to flick through this here and pick up any for discussion. Record high temperatures across the Northern Hemisphere over the last months. Biodiversity rapidly decreasing. European energy bills are rising rapidly. Leaders unable to reach agreement on phase out of coal at COP26. COP27 sponsored by Coca-Cola. High vulnerability of farmers due to climate change conditions and extreme weather events, loss of crops, decreased productivity. First generation to have to consider the effect on the planet in decision whether to have children. Increase in number of extreme weather events in Central America and the Caribbean. Devastating flooding in Pakistan. Extreme weather events becoming more frequent. New EU taxonomy on corporate sustainability due diligence. Rising sea levels. Bird flu pandemic. High prices, energy and gas. Electric cars are becoming normalized. Unable to build new houses because of CO2 levels. The poorest are suffering the most. The power of influence the fossil fuel industry has. Crops are failing. Overturning ban on trafficking. Mass extinction event has started. New licenses to explore or to exploit, I assume, and explore oil, gas, coal. It's interesting to think about this as maybe we're standing in the future somewhere and we're looking back, reading the news from 10 years ago, and this is what we're seeing the state of the world was like. This is what we see in the newspaper about what Earth and its challenge of climate change was looking like. Global net zero goals have no plan, data or solid accounting behind them. Breaking records for extreme heat is the norm. Portugal and other countries, other 44 countries are at risk of water scarcity. Islands on the verge of disappearing. Now, this is painting the picture of a crisis, isn't it? 44 countries are at risk of water scarcity. Islands on the verge of disappearing. Farmers are being threatened, devastating floods, risk of sea level rise. This is a portrait of a crisis. Climate denial is replaced by there are more important issues we need to deal with. Many species going extinct. and the impact that will have on the ecosystem overall. Biodiversity loss, trees dying, drying rivers, an increase in wildfires around the world, COVID pandemic caused by environmental destruction. 69% biodiversity loss, 69% decline in the wildlife populations of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish across the globe in the last 50 years. Oil subsidies and continued fracking over investment in renewables. Society is obsessed with stuff. City governments find it hard to fund climate projects. There are over 5 trillion species of plastic litter the ocean. This is a very interesting mosaic of what's going on here. Governments reacting in fear, freeze, head in the sand, avoid the problem. Nuclear energy weaponized, ocean acidification, warmer summers and colder winters. Plastic waste dumping in marine. Biodiversity loss, collapse of coral reefs. Loss of climate research going on, lots of climate research going on. Desertification and underground water droughts. Loss of species, plants, insects, animals. It's a very interesting kind of picture that's being presented here. Anybody want to comment on anything specifically here or generally about this? Do we think this captures what's going on? Extreme weather events, loss of biodiversity. City governments find it hard to fund climate projects. Vulnerability of infrastructure systems. Yeah, that's an aspect of this equation for sure. We find ourselves in a vulnerable situation, not just because of these changes, but because of our incapacity to adapt and these legacy systems that weren't designed for this new world. Ocean seabed marine mining. Changing ocean currents. Despite regulation and technical progress, GES emissions are not decreasing. So that's a fascinating look at the news in 2022. By the end of this, we're going to look at the news in 2030 or 2040 and see what that looks like with our changes that we make down here. But thank you very much for contributing on that. We're going to stay moving forwards. Just to note, we will be, after this session, our little team will be doing a synthesis session to synthesize what you've come up with, and we'll share that back to you in a future event. We'll let you know more about that towards the end of this event. So let's stay going for the moment. We're collecting all your ideas. The next one here is around current patterns. So patterns are the changes in variables that occur over a period of time. They are the trends that we perceive taking place over time. So these snapshots up here are actually the product of underlining patterns and trends over time. So we're going down one level of the iceberg here. We're getting to something more fundamental. What's happening over time? These patterns and trends. We want to explore that now. So once again, we'll take 5 minutes to collect your ideas. So please post them up here, relatively small like this would be great. And then we'll come back and discuss. Any questions or issues, please post them in the chat. Okay, we stay going. So this is current patterns and trends over time. What did we come up with here? We have a tendency to look for short-term and not systemic solutions, kind of limited time horizons view of the whole thing, lack of respectful for nature, diversity, etc. Overconsumption of water, lack of incentives to change consumer habits, company policy. Rejection of individual responsibility, justified by negligence of large-scale drivers. Greenwashing and greenwashing. Greenwashing within the fashion industry. Fast fashion not stopping anytime soon. The implementation of some solutions that seem climate friendly but are not when the overall impact is assessed. Electric cars and the emissions to produce batteries. Yeah, in many ways, the complexity of what goes on behind the scenes in our economy easily overwhelms us, and we can't see the full picture. It makes it easy for greenwashing, lose sight of what's really going on. People are taking recycling seriously. People are over-consuming, e.g. Electricity, gas, eating habits, luxury items. Yeah, and a lot of the advancements that have been made, say, in renewable energy have been offset by increases in consumption, global consumption, increase of natural disaster, e.g. flooding, heat waves, and so on. Business model excludes externalities. Accounting counts nature as free. Too much focused on talking and defining. We have to do and act. So not enough action, or a certain disconnect between a lot of talk and actual action that doesn't really happen. A lot of this greenwashing stuff, a lot of talk and a lot of this greenwashing stuff. Innovative policy, innovative public-private partnerships for innovative, sustainable solutions. I versus them, other. Inability, unwillingness to take into account complexity and planetary interconnectedness. Public awareness and vocabulary of climate issues growing. Yes, certainly is. Population increasing, global economy continues to grow, demanding more and more resources. Of this kind of contradictory situation. Sometimes we hear all this great news about the growth of renewables and awareness and all this, but then we also have this massively growing global economy and increasing demand and so forth. Global CO2 emissions from energy are set to grow this year by close to 300 million tons, only a fraction of the almost 2 billion tons rise in 2021. Expectations that the global energy crisis would lead to a big jump in emissions are defied. Lip service, no action, talking only. Sustainability policy, nice to have. Efforts to tackle climate change, little to no results. Do we think that's true? Anybody want to talk on that? No? Bryony, you can unmute if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was just two examples that I wanted to write down then and realize we're out of time. But if you look at what Patagonia's just done and changed their whole business model into all of the profits are going to go and into a fund that are basically to try and save the Amazon and into green projects. And then companies like Ethereum, which were Bitcoin, which had the carbon footprint of Switzerland and has now reduced its footprint by like 99%. like there are real examples of quite impressive change, but it's on the grand scheme of things, it's not filtered down yet. But I think, and like I made this comment before, and I'm doing it as well. I'm focusing on the really bad stuff, and I'm always like, oh, where's the good stuff as well, because it is happening. But I think it's hard to think about it when there's so much going on that's quite overwhelming.
And isn't it also maybe that we find it difficult to hold two contradictory views of the world? Things may be getting better in one direction and worse in another direction.
Yeah.
We want a kind of unified picture, maybe. Yeah. Anybody else want to talk on that, or as they go? Okay, business as usual, despite increased knowledge of the state of affairs and need for change. Okay, more protests. In the 60s, it was okay to dump your personal waste in the ocean. Now it's not. Yeah, I mean, big things are certainly changing and have changed, both in positive and negative directions. Recycling of paper, plastic, etc., has increased, as at least in wealthier parts of the world. Increase in awareness of range of issues and their interconnected nature, increase in anxiety and paralysis at trying to solve interconnected nature of problems, increase in practices promoting mindfulness, equanimity, connection to self, others, and nature. So there's a lot of things going on. It's not a kind of a one-sided picture. Growth measures by GDP, but also movements to counter that and present alternative ideas to growth. Fuel and food poverty increases. Everyone's an expert. No one listens to the science. Split between North countries and Southern countries. Lack of awareness between temporal cause and effect contributes to denial. Yeah, it's a lot of the complexity that we struggle with, isn't it? That the scale of all of this, and that many different things are happening at the same time, and the inequalities that go on behind the scenes between North and South and so on. And this thing of time, temporal cause and effect contribute to denial. The complexity and difficult to grasp the scale of all of this can be a pathway to denial. Okay, GDP continues to rule. Do people agree with that? Does anybody disagree with that? Do you think that's a good, an accurate statement?
I think it is changing, and so you have the rise of the idea of natural capital in different places. So particularly in the UK, that is growing. So valuing, attributing value to natural resources, as opposed to just focusing on GDP.
Great.
Can I put a comment on that?
Quickly, yeah.
Henry. Yeah, I think as long as, if you look at larger media overall, you constantly read, oh, China's GDP is gonna go down that much, or it's only going. As long as the World Bank and all these big institutions continue to use this terminology, then we have to accept that this is the measure that is used and it rules. You can only say that there's been a change the day the World Bank or the economies or something talks about in a different way of measuring growth, or and not growth, but progress in a different way.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a lot of things here, that actually the core, shall we say, of this system, as you say, that's about measurement, but other aspects like how we get our energy, right, remains within that industrial system that's still creating the problem. Okay, let's stay going. We'll move down now to current structures. So these are the underlying rules, norms, policies, guidelines, power structures, distribution of resources, or the way that information moves around in the system. And the structure of our institutions, should we say, and structure of our economy, that creates these patterns. And we want to explore that now. We'll stay moving along quickly for the sake of time. So please grab a sticky, and we'll take another 5 minutes to post up here your ideas on what are we're getting down to the lower levels of the iceberg here, where systems change starts to happen, or the real underlying systemic patterns of the way this system is organized. That could be the way that value flows and is exchanged. It could be the information exchange or rules, as mentioned here. So please post up your stickies. We'll take 5 minutes there, and we'll listen to our lovely calm flow music as we go along. I hope you like it. Yeah, it could be, for example, the way that we're accounting for things in the system. We kind of touched upon it there. Like, what are we actually keeping track of? What are we assessing for? And things like this that are going to be part of the systemic structures. Yeah. In case you're struggling with the stickies, you simply join the mirror board. You'll find the link, find where we are in this section. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a toolbar here. And you just move down to where it says stickies there. And you click on that. And then you move over to the board and you click on the board, and a sticky is created. And then you simply type in here like that, and it's done. I believe you can also press N, and you'll get to the same option there, and then just click on the board from there, and it'll create a sticky. Hopefully you're able to do that. If you still have an issue, post it in the chat. stay going for the sake of time. Just for those newcomers, to summarize where we are, we're working on the iceberg canvas here. We're on the left-hand side where we're thinking about the existing system on its different levels. Before we move over to the right-hand side, we'll be talking about the new system that could emerge if we change the paradigm. So we have started out looking at the events, what's going on in the system, what do we see as the outcomes in the system at the moment. We then thought about the underlying patterns that are creating those, the trends over time. And now we're looking at systemic structures that are creating the existing patterns and outcomes. So this is what we have here. Let's see, government leaders living in a bubble. Yeah, in some ways, but it's also their institutions, isn't it? The structures they're part of and maybe not adapted to this kind of challenge they face. So short-term policy cycles within government. Yeah, that's an example of a structure that's not really adapted or aligned with the kind of challenges we're facing here. No, not invented. Here, every org. Not invented. Here, every org is inventing their own wheel. Yep, recreating the wheel. I guess that's talking to kind of lack of collaboration. Yeah, and trying to get synergies between organizations instead of each one, yeah, recreating the wheel. Okay, we're scared of change, even if the change is beneficial to us in the long run. Academic research prioritizes and funding. Academic research priorities and funding. Our organizing principle is still around GDP and its growth. We are scared of change. Yeah, who will pay on whose budget when there's several stakeholders. Yeah, the actual structure of the business model, should we say, and the value flows isn't really set up in a way to deal with collective commons kind of issues, funding the commons, should we say. Multiple stakeholder networks effect on climate not costed in production, e.g. cheap food, environmental awareness featuring more in school curriculum, UN global targets, COP targets, growing number of offices like Climate Czar. Inequality and climate change regarding countries. Yeah. Polarization being used as political weapon. Yeah, we're getting a political crisis at the same time as a environmental crisis, and rendering kind of polarization and paralysis. Regulation, rules and norms, transactional model versus relational model. The bottom line, GDP, the holy grail, markets that look at the value of materials, products from the need of something, not the negative impact it has. Look at the value of the transactions. Yeah, the value models, the structure of these is not really, and the accounting systems is not really working in many ways. Siloed structures, short impact, and institutional structures are siloed, and the recreation of wheels of the wheel in these different silos, so that we aren't actually, our resources aren't really adding up to something greater. Short impact assessment equations, fragmented action frameworks, emotional bond to cars, EU Green Deal, strict rules waste companies hindering circular model, shareholder value driven by means of KPIs. Okay, we won't jump into them now because we don't necessarily have time. So let's stay going to the next one here, where we're looking at the bottom of the iceberg, what it's about, changing the mental models, the ways of looking at the world, which is the highest leverage point. When we start to change our conception of what's going on and people start to look at it in very different ways, then a radically new system can emerge out of that, as we'll talk about in a minute. So current models please join me here. What are the key mental models expressed through beliefs, attitudes, morals, expectations, values, or culture, which allow our current structures to continue? And this is also about values too. What are foundational kind of values in this system that create our way of looking at the world and what we value? So, yep, we'll take 5 minutes to do this. Any questions, post them in the chat. Of course, you'll have the link to this board afterwards, so you'll be able to come back and explore everything that's posted here. Okay, great. Lots of ideas here. Well done. Wow. Wealthy. To have plenty of money. Yeah, wealth. Going back to the GDP thing, does academia sufficiently prepare us to tackle sustainability issues for the real world? Yeah, interesting point. Our knowledge base and our ways of education don't necessarily prepare us for the real world's issues. Business is about making profit, not fixing the world. It's all too difficult. Yeah, that's an interesting paradigm or mental model. The business of business is to make money, even when they have these massive effects, externalities, positive and negative in the world. They're still seen as private things for maximizing profit in many ways. It's all too difficult. Yeah, that is one. As we started researching this issue and the kind of mental models and narratives around climate change in society, that's one that you come up against. People just feel it's overwhelming, it's too complex, they can't deal with it. They can't deal with the complexity of the issue. Difficult and collective, individual and collective identity crisis. Now, these are great points here, I think. If the government, it's the government's job. Yeah, that's a good one. Deferring responsibility to the government because we can't deal with the complexity of the issue. Climate does not really affect me. Ego anxiety, eco anxiety, egocentric worldview, the belief that humans rule the world. Maslow's pyramid of needs. Yeah, and I guess for much of the world's population, this is just too far up on the hierarchy. They're just trying to earn a living today and tomorrow. Competition over collaboration. If you have more, I will have less. Zero-sum view of the world. Fear and scarcity mindset. Nature will fix itself. Yeah, or the economy will fix itself. The economy will find a way of fixing this. The crisis of trust and legitimacy. Fear of systems level changes resulting in incremental change. Actually, I put that one up there as one example. Government focused on markets, managers and metrics. Yeah, a very managerial approach to government. Linear thinking, short-term thinking, fear and anxiety, lack of ecosystem thinking, poor knowledge of the issue. Incapacity to really, synthesize, for us in general, to really synthesize the complexity of this into something that's coherent and we're able to grasp, but is also reflective of the reality. Belief that only extreme protest work may alienate others. Need to hold on to certain value frameworks. Belonging via religion. Yeah, a lot of our stories about our place in the world and so on don't really equip us for this kind of challenge, these kind of changes. The economic theory too.
Yeah.
If
Can
it
I
does
make a
not work, yep, quickly.
I can make it comes from me again. I actually have it in the family via my wife, where she has a brother who's a economic libertarian and a sister who is a Catholic, and discussion is very hot. He thinks of, despite knowing that we're doing wrong, that he thinks in the belief that humans' rights of choice, the choice is more important than doing the right thing, for instance, right? And then you have the Catholic hardcore, which says the weather has always changed, is the comment, and these kind of things. So, people feel that they like to belong to something, that their ideas that they have had from the beginning are the correct ones. Because if you say, okay, this is not working, then you admit, okay, that I failed as a human being to have the correct values. Hence, everybody else is wrong.
Yeah, that's really good examples. Thank you, Henry. So true. Our paradigm, the stories we tell ourselves can completely inhibit us to adapt and make the changes and even see the reality in front of us. Okay, we are used to adapting to environmental change. It's your problem you are experiencing, so it is your responsibility. Individual thinking, yeah, that's one aspect of it. Ecosystem thinking prevalent in decision making. Okay, let's stay going for the sake of time. Well done. Those are really interesting contributions. Now we're going to try and change the paradigm, right? So we're still on this bottom level about the mental models and the way we're framing the stories we're telling ourselves about this situation, the way we're looking at the world. So let's please jump in here. Here we're going to talk about the new paradigm, the systems perspective on all of this, or the new framing that would really help us deal with this in a much more constructive way, deal with the complexity of it, and start to understand it in a way, understand ourselves and our relationship with these other systems in a way that's much more productive for us to be able to create new structures and new outcomes in the system. So we'll take 5 minutes. Please jump in there. So I just put a couple of examples up here about what new mental models and paradigms might look like. Ecosystem thinking, seeing ourselves as independent with the broader systems we form part of and the value of the commons. Might be one example of a new paradigm. Systems awareness, looking outwards and upwards instead of too narrowly focused on specific issues, analytical thinking. So those are just two examples of new ways of thinking that might help us here. Okay, I'm going to start looking at some of these. Feel free to stay posting up here. And as mentioned, you'll be able to come back and see them all afterwards and explore them all. So carbon footprint analysis, systemic change, willingness to engage in construction of current worldview, deconstruction of current worldviews and beliefs, yeah. Yep. Radical compassion, seeing ourselves as interrelated and integrated with the environment and each other. Yep, seeing ourselves as part of these broader systems and the influence we have on them and they have on us. Listening to the voices on the ground. It's our planet and everyone has a role to play. Break down the bigger goal to make it more actionable. Showcase all the initiatives already out there so that others can adopt and copy. Systems innovation framework for discussing policy. Definitely, I'd agree with that. So share knowledge and insights for a greater good, pro-social and pro-environmental business operations, learn from nature, biomimicry, systems, holistic thinking. I'm part of something bigger, hence my actions have an impact. Yeah, it's definitely shifting this level of awareness is going to be important to understanding ourselves as something, as part of something broader, and start to take account for that. Transcend individualism. It's okay to be wrong. It is human, and the biggest gift we have is to learn, adapt, and change. Yeah, this thing of adaptation instead of resistance is going to be learning to be able to adapt. Is going to be key to this. Equity, not equality. Self-love, we can all make change together. Self-control, yeah, maybe more of an emphasis on collective capacity rather than individual. Collaboration and collaboration versus competition. More valuing of relationships than things. Value people for what they do, not for what they own. System stewardship, integrational fairness and justice, recognize and embrace complexity, and embrace vulnerability, and embrace the need for change and adaptation. Maybe public value stems from what we want for society and the planet, as opposed to the value as financial outcomes. Planetary boundaries. Collective thinking and acting. Yeah, quite often we reduce things back down to the individual, as someone was saying, but how can we grow our collective capacity? Follow nature's cycle, founding principles for all systems and physical design. We are nature. Ways to make stakeholders agree on interdisciplinary concepts and actions. Build systems from a place of care and nurture and possibilities, and not from a place of fear and lack. Great. Those are really interesting. Thank you very much for that. Yep, we just have how much time left? 15 minutes. So we do need to stay going. We do want to make it to the end here. So the next board is about structures that may emerge out of those new guiding principles, those new values, those new mental models. So here we are. What are the new structures that may emerge from the new values and mental models? If we had something, for example, down there around holism or systems thinking, we might see the emergence of more decentralized structures. Or if we had something about new values or incorporating new values, then we might here have new structures around accounting systems, full cost accounting for the value and resources, the ecosystem and atmosphere. These are examples of kind of systemic changes we might see in our ways of assessing, valuing, organizing our institutional structures, our information flows, so on, just as we saw on the other side about the old structures. This is what would emerge if we adopted a new paradigm, new way of looking at things. So let's take just 4 minutes to do this one, please, and then we'll come back and discuss. Okay, so just briefly to take a look at these, because we need to move on. Decentralized energy systems. Yeah, I posted that up as an example. Sustainability as default. Move from GDP to well-being metrics. Change in ways of assessing and measuring things based upon a different set of values. Circular is the norm. Yeah, that's an important systemic structural change, isn't it? Across many dimensions, materials, water, even energy, commerce, so on and so forth. That would really change the way our economies are structured and could have major implications for decarbonization. Economy of care, well-being, and love. Regenerative resilience, holistic communities. Everything is connected to something. New governance structures, SI certification for policy creation at the city level. Blockchain enabled wiki ideas and incentivize of best ideas. Yeah, decentralized technologies could play an important role here. Collective action platform, SDGs and ESG, mission-orientated innovation policy, an increase in local media, new forms and business models for mass media, new and better collaborative sense-making tools. Yep. Less financial driven society, learning and experimentation over metrics alone, decentralized and less hierarchical learning organizations. Yeah, this is going to be an important part of responding effectively to climate change, our institutions and their capacity to adapt and learn and make sense of this new world, adapt and learn to the big changes that are coming about. Sharing economy, degrowth, core value, compass-driven business, circular by design, move towards regeneration, blockchain-driven transparency. Yes, being able to see what's going on, getting this data that we need. Blockchain, decentralized technology could be important. More recognition and value to green enterprises, availability of sustainable options for single-use plastic for fast fashion, etc. Eco-design and implementation of circular economy. Okay, financial incentives for climate-friendly businesses, bottom-up ownership of climate change in local communities. Great, empowering local communities and city governments. Okay, liminal decentralized resource and knowledge sharing structures to advance share value solution development across disciplines and nations. Yeah, trying to get away from recreating the wheel. And decentralized resource and knowledge sharing structures to advance share value solutions. Great, thank you very much for that. Let's stay going to these last two sections here. We just have less than 10 minutes left, so we'll try and stay on time. What we're talking about here is what are the patterns over time that would emerge if we manage to change these mental models, if we manage to change these systemic structures. What would over time start emerging in terms of the trends that we start to see? We saw them before, a lot of them going in the wrong direction. What would things look like based upon these new structures that we just discussed? We'll take 4 minutes to discuss. If you need any help with anything or questions, you can post them in the chat. I just posted up an example here, growing resilience in ecosystems. That could be a trend that we might see, you know, in 20 years or something like this, or governance of ecosystems, governance of ecosystems moving towards becoming more decentralized. Just a couple of examples. Okay, I'm going to jump in here and take a look. Equity in country financial responsibility. So these are the new trends that we might see over time. Increased in high reliability organizations, replicating well-designed infrastructure for green tech as a standard approach. Local action plays a bigger role. Yeah, I think there are a few around kind of decentralization here, or having structures that deal with bounded rationality in the institutional setup. Teaching interdisciplinary meditation techniques in schools and business for greater connection to larger systems. Yeah, education on SI approaches to climate change, increased awareness and responsibility over own acts and their consequences, increased wisdom, increased participation, increasing resilience, increasing hope. Yeah, these are things that are kind of going in the opposite, many of those direction at the moment. Local actions play a bigger role. Climate stabilization. Great. So let's see those, and we'll finally get to this last board here. So we just get to talk about this one before we wrap up. As mentioned, we've already organized a future session. Adriana will tell you about it in a minute, so that we can come back and discuss some of these ideas once we've synthesized them. But let's just take a look at this one. This is finally the events that we might see emerging in the future, and it may take time. Headlines in 2030. I gave some examples here. Research reveals 99% of farms are working as carbon sinks. Or headline in 2030, climate taxes phased out as full cost accounting systems work to restore a new dynamic equilibrium to Earth's carbon cycle. Do you want to try a headline from 2030, or what do you think would be the outcomes that we'd hopefully realize by changing the paradigm, the structure, the patterns, and so on? We'll just take 2 minutes to do that because we're short on time. Okay, we're all out of time, unfortunately, so we're going to wrap up here. Would love for anybody who wants to stay afterwards to post up some more ideas here. That would be great. As mentioned, we will, our little team will synthesize this and share it back with you. I'm going to hand it over to Adriana now to let you know a little bit about next steps and any ways that you might follow up from this. But thank you all very much for joining and partaking. This was really interesting, and looking forward to actually sorting through these and seeing what we can create as a synthesis in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Jos, and thank you everyone for your active participation and for all the ideas we were able to collect. The next steps would be to present the results of today's exercise on November 10th at 1 p.m. in a session called Reframing the Climate Crisis with Systems Thinking. We listed the event in the platform, and you can find the link in the Miro board as well. A little before this session, on November 3rd, we will have Mariana Mirabile from